Coming to paperback and e-readers in 2021, John Haynes, Taking Care of Business. The man who rules the world breaks on a brand new partner to help him take care of business in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Taking Care of Business in 2021 at online booksellers everywhere.
Hear everybody talking about big tech and big tech censorship, but I'm going to show you how to easily fight big tech and big tech censorship in one simple, easy fashion. See this section called Log Out? That's how you fight against your big tech censorship. I'll show you again here with Twitter as well. Here is how you fight your big tech censorship. You just simply do something as simple as this. Here we go. Just simply log out of the app and simply stop using it. So this is how you fight your big tech. Very simple, very easy, and you just have to have the discipline and resolve to just simply stop using these applications, because you have the ultimate power in over these companies. If it wasn't for your foot traffic going to these websites and you, in some cases, creating the content for these websites, these tech gurus would not be billionaires and they would not be able to amass the wealth that they have. Now, these companies say they're private companies and they have their right to do things as related to their terms of service, but you as an American have the power to make these companies what they are with your foot traffic. Every time you log onto your keyboard or your phone to go to one of these websites, you give these people power, and you can take that power away by doing something as simple as simply logging out and no longer using said application. And if you really want to take it to an extreme, you can go out on your way and just say you're going to go and delete your account. Because if it wasn't for you using these programs like YouTube, Google, Facebook, or Twitter, these people would not be billionaires right now, because it's your going to these websites and generating that foot traffic that make the advertisers want to advertise on these sites. And if these people want to go out here and so-called censor people by blocking them off their site, then you have the power to block them off your time, because your time is precious and you need to understand the value of your time. If this company wants to go out of its way to censor people, then you can censure them by not spending time on that site, because none of these websites have any value unless we, the people, give them value, and we can take that value away by simply walking away from these websites. And all of these websites will, as I guarantee you, will crash like MySpace did, like AOL did, and like your Yahoo did, and like Tumblr recently did. I mean, Tumblr recently decided to believe it was a god and was going to censor people for the type of content they wanted to put on their site. And the content providers said, okay, you want to censor people and flag people. Then they just took their content off the website, and Tumblr dropped like a rock and became so worthless that Verizon bought it for pennies on the dollar. And the same thing happened to Yahoo and AOL, and the same thing can happen to your Twitter and your Facebook. What can happen is that these websites, these tech companies, they're not as big as people think they are. And if they want to censor their users, the users have the power to censure them by simply walking away from the platform. And they can't really force people to use their website. They can just go to other platforms because remember, it is the users who make the website something successful, and it is the users who make the platform have value. And on the internet, which is fluid, content is king, and people go where the content is. So if they don't see anybody going to see the content, the foot traffic for the website drops, the value to advertisers drop, and the whole website starts to lose value. And that's what happened to MySpace. That's what happened to AOL. That's what happened to Yahoo. That's what happened to Tumblr. And all of those websites are now being were sold to Verizon for pennies on the dollar and are pale shadows of their former selves. Now, most of these people who are upset about censorship don't really understand the internet cycle, and they don't understand that oftentimes these companies have a paradigm as related to how they come. The first part is when they start to come out as small companies begging for investors. Then they open the website. The website starts to become popular. And as the website starts to become popular, these executives start to believe that they're gods. And as they start to believe that they are gods, they start creating arbitrary terms of service and arbitrary policies. And these arbitrary terms of service and arbitrary policies wind up alienating their users. And as this is happening, oftentimes you get lots of trolls and attention seekers and drama kings who flood the website with junk content, and the website becomes untenable for many of the artists, writers, and creative people like myself. And those artists, writers, and creative people like filmmakers wind up abandoning the platform, and then the platform starts to decline, and it becomes filled with these trolls, ascension seekers, racists, white supremacists, and other crazy types, and then the site becomes a dead zone, and it starts to go on to become completely forgotten, like many of the bygone, forgotten websites, again, like your Yahoo, like your AOL, which is was a Hades to be in, and your Tumblr had become, and many of these other websites I can remember, they just they became ghost towns because normal people left them. Then the site started to lose traffic. People stopped logging into the website, and they broke out of their habit, and eventually said website went the way of a dinosaur and was practically bought for pennies on the dollar by another tech guy who remembers, oh, I remember when these sites like Angel Fire were top notch. I remember when Yahoo had GeoCities, and I remember when they had sites like i1.com and many of these other websites from the early 2000s. And what we're seeing right now is a lot of these guys in big tech who are getting too big for their draws, and they're about to get a big foot planted in the backside by many of their users, because at the end of the day, it is the user who has the power, and that many users are just upset about censorship when they should understand they have the right to censure these companies. And it's not about you arguing with these companies about their terms of service. It's about you understanding that you can live life on your terms. And a part of living life on your terms is understanding you are not dependent on these companies, and you are not dependent on these companies for your life. I mean, what is being on a website? I mean, yes, you have friends, but you can also talk to those friends in email, or you could talk to them on the phone. I mean, what's to stop you from communicating with these people? Yes, social media like Twitter and Facebook are popular, but there are numerous alternatives you can go to, like BitChute, like DLive, or like your MeWe. And it's us, the users, who make these websites popular. And if you have a problem with one big tech company, you can always go to another company and start using their service. That's something most people don't really understand. They just sit there, and because they are wedded to these companies and are caught up in their habit of using them, think that they only can use those companies. But you always have an option to go to, and you can go to one of these other companies if you want, because if everybody has, again, you the user at the end of the day have the ultimate power. I mean, you can go to Minds, MeWe, DLive, BitChute, dozens of other companies, and you don't have to be wedded to a handful of social media companies and believe that those are the only places where you can be social. I mean, as a old school user of the internet, I remember the days when we would go to message boards the like the Foosh.com to talk about comic books and action figures. And I remember when we would go to websites like the now defunct Wizard World to talk about comics. So when one site goes down, people migrate to another. And that has been the paradigm for most users of the internet for years. Whenever a website starts to get too big for its draws, what the users do is they simply stop using that website. And eventually, what happens is those websites, because they lose their foot traffic, the advertisers stop paying ad dollars on them. And then eventually, what happens is those websites wind up losing all of their users and eventually wind up becoming footnotes in internet history, like your MySpace became a footnote in internet history, like your Yahoo became a footnote in internet history, your AOL became a footnote in internet history. And AOL was so big at one time, they practically bought Warner Brothers. And what happened was AOL's stock price started to decline when it was AOL Time Warner. Warner Brothers divested from AOL, and at one time tech guru who was considered to be a major power broker, Steve Case, fell into obscurity. And the same thing happened to the two guys who founded Yahoo. They had the number one search engine in the world from 2000 to I think about 2006 or so. And then Google took over. And then eventually those guys by 2010 were practically forgotten in obscurity. And Yahoo fell so hard that it was bought by Verizon for pennies on the dollar. And the same thing happened just about a year ago with Tumblr when they decided they were going to censor what they called erotic content. And all the content providers who created said content abandoned the platform, and Tumblr fell like a rock. And eventually, Tumblr's foot traffic crawled to nothing, and Tumblr was purchased by Verizon for pennies on the dollar. So there's a pattern when it comes down to these tech companies. Many of these guys don't really see the paradigm that is as related to them. Many of them believe that the customer, they are dependent on them, and they believe that because they've got what they thought was a captive audience, people have to agree to their terms of service. But the internet is a fluid thing, and most people go where the content is. And on the internet, content is king. And if you don't have quality content, people start walking away from your platform, and eventually your platform starts to degrade, like the infamous I forget what it's called, Daily Motion, which has been a YouTube alternative for years, but due to an arbitrary terms of service, most people simply just don't use it and have nothing to do with it at all. And in fact, your Daily Motion is practically a ghost town, and most people don't even know it even exists anymore. I mean, this site has been a YouTube competitor for years, and it has fallen into obscurity because nobody wants to bother with them due to their crazy terms of service. So the same thing that happened to Dailymotion and many of the other sites I mentioned. This can happen to your Facebook, your YouTube, your Google, and your many of your other websites, because many in big tech, they just don't understand that it is we, the user, who make these sites popular. It is we, the user, that made these guys billionaires, and it is we, the users, that can make competitors millionaires as well. And it is we, the users, who can make or break one of these companies. That's something they're not really thinking about, because these guys are so caught up in their ego and their feelings about being the tech gods, like their predecessors at AOL, at MySpace, at these other platforms, Yahoo. But they don't understand, again, the internet is fluid, and just as you start creating arbitrary terms of censorship to get rid of one group of people, a competitor is going to come in and replace you sooner rather than later. And you may actually wind up falling yourself, because if people don't use your platform, you will fall into obscurity. And you will fall into obscurity because, again, internet companies are based primarily on the users that use them. And if those users choose not to use those companies, then those companies wind up falling into obscurity and wind up becoming completely forgotten. So we might be talking about Facebook, Google, and your Twitter right now, but I guarantee you in 5 to 10 years, those names will be just as footnotes in internet history, the way Yahoo, MySpace, Tumblr, and your many other websites like Angel Fire are right now. And this could be the final fate of these companies, because there is a cycle and a paradigm to this, and many of these guys don't see that they're at the end of the life cycle of their companies right now. Now, if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That helps me stay on the web and be able to make more videos and be able to pay for the internet. And if you want to also help out, you can pick up some of my positive black fiction on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.